Hey class, today we'll be going over the history of engineering and how engineering as a discipline has affected the world over time. Even though we're going to find out that it was the term and the actual um, specific discipline of being called an engineer didn't happen until the 1900s, we still had a huge impact on how the society has been created throughout the ages. Even going back to 3000 BC, the idea of the engineer at that time was the person that used iron. So if you ever seen, with a blacksmith using iron to create the tools that they needed. Then you had what will be termed as civil engineers from 2000 to 100 BC, because they were the guys that actually helped, design, build the pyramids, which is, a form of engineering. And then especially the Roman aqueducts. Again, we were talking about earlier this week, we were talking about the civil engineers being responsible for how water moves through the land, which is, we brought up Harvey and how that's why we have parks to this day to have those grasslands, but also they're the water systems. So the Romans actually created sewer systems back in 100 BC. Then in the 1750s, we began the Industrial Revolution. That's when we really started to expand beyond engineers, mainly being civil engineers. With the Industrial Revolution, we started to do more physically. So that was with the mechanical engineers being able to use the steam engines, and it's when we started to build factories, and with agriculture started to really grow in the 17 1800s, because we were learning to uh, use machinery and electricity and different forms of power to really start to push those things forward. Then that brings us to the 1900s, where we are now not just doing mechanical and electrical. The Wright brothers began the aerospace phase of engineering. We also get a lot of chemical engineering happening at this time, where we're seeing that by combining chemicals, you can create plastics. So that's where a lot of things that have been built with either wood or iron throughout history, we start to get into an age where we can build these things via plastic. In 1913, another great civil engineering feat was the creation of the Panama Canal, which is a large artificial waterway that connects the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean. But the reason I bring it up that is because this is a man-made waterway. Then you start to enter the age that we're in now with the 2000s, where you started to get a lot of computer and software engineering coming into play. So late 80s, 90s, most of the 2000s is where we got the computer and software engineers. So what began as primarily mechanical, civil, what began with civil engineers grew into mechanical engineers and chemical engineers and electrical engineers, and from those four spawned all other forms of engineers that we've been discussing in the previous week. So today was a brief lesson, just kind of going over that impact. The only other thing I'd like to talk about with the history is, as we change things throughout the history, we also end up changing the future. So with that, environmental engineers had to come into play because of the things that we were doing with the waste of the Industrial Revolution, the chemicals from the chemical engineers were starting to make becoming pollutants, and now we're also dealing with the fact that electrical components and things like TVs and such have gotten so cheap in the phones that we're dealing with an environmental waste problem because we're now throwing away so many electronics. See you in the next video.